Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming. This is the Morro Bay Winter Bird Festival, and my name is Chris Cameron. I'm the program chair of the Morro Bay Winter Bird Festival, and on behalf of the board, I welcome you and thank you for coming. As you know, this is the normal weekend for the Bird Festival. It would have been our 25th anniversary, and we wanted to do it right, so we postponed our 25th until next year. So we wanted to do a little something special for you. So we're offering this program by John Muir titled Introduction to Bird Sketching and Taking Notes in the Field. John will be our keynote speaker next year, and we are lucky to have him speak this year. While this presentation is free, we accept donations for use for something special next year. And we'd also like to thank the sponsoring organization, the Morro Coast Audubon Society. The Winter Bird Festival is fortunate to be under their wing, so to speak. So before I begin, I want to let you know a couple of things about this Zoom. Your audio has been automatically muted to keep out any distracting noises. And during the presentation, I will be taking questions and comments in the chat. So you can look at that little chat icon either at the top or the bottom bar of your computer. And when you press that chat button, look for Chat with Chris. Jack, or John Muir Laws, as he's known, Jack to his friends, which I think now you're all considered friends, so you can call him Jack. While he's busy with the presentation, I'll be noting down those questions. And then when the presentation's over, I'll ask your questions to Jack for live answers. So with no further ado, I'd like to introduce you to John Muir, or Jack Laws, because now you're a friend. And he's a scientist, he's an educator, he's an author, and he helps people forge a deeper and more personal connection with nature through keeping illustrated nature journals and understanding science. His work intersects science, art, and mindfulness. Trained as a wildlife biologist and associate for the California Academy of Sciences, he observes the world with rigorous attention. He looks for mysteries, plays with ideas, and seeks connections in all he sees. Attention, observation, curiosity, and creative thinking are not gifts, but they're skills that grow with training and deliberate practice. As an educator and author, Jack teaches techniques and supports routines that develop these skills to make them a part of your everyday life. So everybody, as loud as you can because you're on mute, welcome Jack John Muir Laws. Hey.
Oh, thank you. Stop. Oh, thank you. Oh, sorry. Hey, everybody. It's really fun to be here. And I can't wait till we are able to all do this in person. And I've been to a number of Morro Bay Winter Bird Festivals in the past. It is off the hook cool. So I want to encourage you to, if you join us next year, it will be so much fun. Today, what I want to do is to share with you folks some strategies and ideas that I think are a game changer in making birding so much more of a rich experience. Already, what's birding got going for it? Well, first of all, birds are ridiculously cool. They're like mammals, but with feathers, and they can fly, and they do everything out in front of you. Like if you watch mammals, you're looking at tracks and scat, and people get really excited. I found the track of a coyote, right? If you're a bird watcher, you're actually watching the organism do everything out in front of you, because they can fly, so they can get away with doing everything right out in plain sight. And it's ridiculously cool. And then the colors and the songs, I'm sorry, birds rock. And it also gets us out into the world. If you are like, let's go birding. Like the way I got started birding is, I'm sorry, I didn't think I'd have this reaction. So some time ago, my dad was having heart trouble, and I needed to get him to go out for walks, and he didn't want to go for walks. But I knew that he liked looking at birds. And so I said, hey, Dad, let's go birding. And he'd be like, oh, yeah, son, let's go birding. And so, originally I was just doing my bird watching to get my dad some exercise. And then one day when he pished a ruby crown kinglet out of a bush, I got it. And I've been a hardcore birder ever since. But the birding, it gets you out into the field, out into this beautiful, beautiful world and encountering these things. And we can do it at a safe, COVID-safe distance. It's wonderful. But what I want to do today is to suggest to you something that when we go out and we do this and just celebrate the world and the birds, how to get so much more out of those moments in nature. And the way, what it is that our brains, as good as they are not really designed to pay attention to the subtleties and the beauties of the world. Essentially, it's good enough to kind of get us through the woods without being picked off by a tiger while we're like collecting roots and tubers and things. But there's all this amazing subtlety that is happening all the time. And what we want to do is to start to kind of turn the dial on the level which we are able to kind of focus and pay attention to the world. And I find that, if we're out in front of some birds and I just say to some of my students, I'll say, I want you to pay really close attention to those, like look really hard at them. And, I think telling somebody to look really hard at something is a completely useless, directive, because, like, what are you doing when you're looking hard at something? You're going like, but your brain very quickly realizes, like, for my survival, this is not necessary. And so your brain goes like, oh, like, let's think about something else. And so we're really easily distracted, even when we're like staring at something. You stare at nature, it just stares back. Like you actually have to be active with your brain to kind of trigger it. Your brain is very efficient and it'll pay attention to the point that it thinks like, okay, I've basically got it here. We can pay attention to something else now. And then our brain goes on to the next thing. And we can give our brain signals that say to our brain that it's okay, it's safe now for you to go on to the next thing. Once your brain thinks it's got kind of a problem figured out, your brain goes, okay, now we can pay attention to that. And that makes sense from a survival standpoint. But there's an infinite levels of beauty and wonder in the most common things that are around us. And how do you get your brain to really tune into those? You have to do something deliberate. You have to do something different than what you normally do. And I believe that keeping a journal is the most powerful way of doing that. And so what I want to do is to share with you folks a few of these strategies. And you do not have to be an artist to do this. You don't have to be able to spell right to do this. But it's an absolute game changer. And an interesting thing is that if you start doing this on a regular basis, things like being able to draw the birds that you see, that ends up being a skill that you develop really, really quickly. And so let's take a look. And so here's my goal. First, I want to sort of show you why I think this nature journaling thing is such a game changer, what it looks like. And then I'm going to give you some strategies to do this yourself. And then I'm going to show you some tricks. I think one of the biggest hangups that people have about it is that a lot of people think that you need to be a bird artist in order to have a journal where you're drawing pictures of birds. And it's not true at all. We're doing this not to make pretty pictures, but it's a way of just tricking our brain into paying more attention to what's around us. But I'm going to show you some tricks to help you draw the birds that you see a little bit more easily. And I'm going to use some passerine birds, and we'll take a look at some strategies of how you see the bird and get that down on your piece of paper. And some strategies of kind of on a bigger picture, so the journal is a lot more than just, a little picture of a duck, right? What other things we can put on those pages? Excuse me. And you'll have a chance to do some drawing and sketching in this class. And then, so I suggest that everybody just get yourself a piece of paper and get yourself a little pencil, and we'll bring those, and it'll be a lot of fun. And that way, when we meet at the Morro Bay Winter Bird Festival next year, you already have be kind of warmed up. You'll be doing some practice. I'll show you even other tricks then, and we will get together and just geek out on this in a big way. And it'll be a lot of fun. Okay, here we go. I'm now going to share a screen with you. All right, there we go. There's the screen I want to share. And hit play. Here we are, Morro Bay Winter Bird Festival. And we today want to explore, whoops, here we go, how to keep your own journal. Now, I'm going to be showing you a way of keeping a journal. It involves drawing pictures, but again, it's not about having to draw pictures. That will allow you to actually see and notice more when you are out spending quality time with the birds. The reasons that we do this, it is not about it's not about making pretty pictures. So a journal is not a sketchbook, but it uses sketches. The reason we do it is that we want to trick our brain into paying attention more deeply and richly than we normally do. And when you sit down with a journal, it will force your brain to do that. So the other thing that's really great about it is that it helps our brain slow down and to take more time doing what you're doing. So if you're out in the field and you're journaling about what you see, you are not covering as much territory. And this is actually, this is a good thing. This is actually a good thing. The reason it is that if we are just kind of going out and identifying, or in some cases, just identifying and counting the things that are in front of us, we are only dabbling in the shallow end of the pool. There's all this richness, all of this richness that is in front of us. But that only becomes apparent to us when we start to pay attention and start looking at the behaviors and spending a little bit more time with things. Sometimes you just spend a little bit more time with a critter and the story begins to unfold in front of you. So there are some things like let's say I say it's a mallard, right? So I've just got the identification. To say it's 7 mallards, right? That's a little bit richer. But those are just just 7 mallards on a pond. That's a sentence. In order to get the paragraph, in order to then stitch paragraphs together to tell the story, you need to sort of sit down and spend a little bit more quality time with whatever it is that you're looking for. And what is amazing is the moment you start doing this, you're going to discover that when you start to spend that time, these stories start to really unfold in front of you. And the other part is that because this takes a little bit more focus and attention, these experiences get locked into your memory so much more richly. The part of your brain that is attached to memory is the same part of your brain that does attention. So to which you pay greater attention to, you're going to remember better. So if you go out on a bird walk and you see, 67 species, you may have had the experience, you kind of go out on one of these trips, you get a high list of birds, but you come back from it not really remembering that much about those critters or about those experiences. The numbers aren't the thing. To get your brain to remember it better, you need to actually force your brain to pay attention at a deeper level. And the journaling is going to make you do that. And the last piece of this is the more you do it, the more fun it becomes, because these stories are really what brings birds alive. There's so much richness in this. All those stories are out there waiting to be read by you. And all you have to do is show up with the right kind of brain. So these are some examples of pages from my journals. And I often tell people about the sort of the critical languages to use in your journal are words and pictures and numbers. And so you don't have to spell right. You don't have to be an artist. You don't have to be a mathematician. But the more that you do that, the better you're going to get at using all of those systems. The tools for doing this are really simple. I suggest that you keep it light, you keep it really portable and accessible. You don't need, if you get a big heavy kit of stuff, you're going to end up leaving that at home. And you'll be like, oh, it's just too much hassle to bring all that junk with me. So keep it lightweight, keep it portable, and essentially the critical thing is I recommend people bring a little journal with them. I recommend ones that are hardbound because they kind of stand up to field work a little bit better. And also you don't need a clipboard out there. And as large as you could realistically regularly bring with you into the field. So the larger the page, the more room there is for all of your thoughts and ideas to spread out. And then you can get all sorts of different interesting ideas and observations interacting with each other on the same page. But the bigger the book, the more likely you are to leave it at home. So go as big as you can realistically really would bring with you. The real mini journals, you can only get a half a thought on a page before you turn the page. So I find those much less useful, but go as big as you can realistically bring with you, because if you go too big, you're not going to bring it. And if you don't have your journal, then you don't have your journal. For tools, a few pens and pencils, and maybe a small set of colored pencils are all you need. I tend to do some of my stuff with watercolor, and that works once you've had a little bit more experience messing around with watercolor. But especially at the start, it just makes your journal a mess to carry if you're doing watercolor. So colored pencils are a great strategy. Small set of colored pencils, a few pens and pencils to journal with, a little journal, and your binoculars, and you're ready to head outside. Right. Let's take a look at kind of some strategies here. One critical piece that sort of getting yourself started every day, I think, is a little bit difficult. When you are, so I often will start, if I'm looking at a big blank page, it's kind of intimidating to me. So I will start by putting in what we call the metadata. That is saying that I'm at Five Brooks Pond and it is September 25th, and the sky is overcast, and it's at 8 in the morning. So I'll just write that information onto the page. It's a lot easier to put other stuff on the page once you have written something on the page. A big blank page is often intimidating. But once you kind of get that metadata on, then that does two things. One, it breaks in your page. And the second is it turns from whatever you put on that page, it turns it from being a just some notes about birds to actually really useful scientific data. Because essentially what you're doing is you're date stamping and georeferencing all the information that you put about birds. So if you get a list of the birds that you saw that day, it is now date stamped and georeferenced. It's now data. And if you want to then plug that into eBird, that's great. And by the way, I'm not, this can be done with eBird, but notice that this is a different activity than just counting and naming things. This is going to help you notice subtleties and details that are beyond just counts and identification. There are essentially three things that I'm putting in my journal. One is my observations. So that can be the appearance, how the bird looks, little behaviors, what they're doing. Kind of here, I've got two different jacanas, and you can see the size differences between them. What are the postures of its legs when the bird is flying? Any little observation that you make is cool, and I want to put it down in here. And that can be counting things, that can be details of plumage, interactions, all of those sorts of things. I want to get those observations down onto my piece of paper. The second is questions. So I'm making observations, and I also want to intentionally start asking questions. If I can get myself curious about something, and I can actually do that deliberately by just starting to ask questions, and then the questions will build, and eventually there'll be something that I really am. Ooh, I'm really interested in this question. Build up your questions and get yourself curious about whatever you're seeing. If you are curious about something, your brain actually starts to work better. You get a big slosh of dopamine in your brain, and your memory's improved, and your ability to kind of stick with a little mystery goes way up. So start looking for those questions. The last little piece is to also intentionally make connections between what I'm seeing. How is the jacana similar or to a coot that I'm familiar with? How is it different than that? How is it like the gallinule that I'm more familiar with? How is it different from that critter? So if I start making connections and saying, how is this like, or how is this different to the stuff that I'm already familiar with, that's going to also help my brain think in really interesting ways. So I have a little mantra that I use called I notice. So that's observations. I wonder, that's asking questions, and it reminds me of making connections. So I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of is what I do on every nature journal page. And that's sort of what you see kind of going into the book. So what you put on the page is I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of. And the techniques that I'm doing is words, pictures, numbers. So words, pictures, numbers, I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of, put those together on the page, and you have your birder's journal. Right. This is just an example of kind of ways that this can look. And these are things that happen when you stop and you start spending more quality time with whatever it is that you're looking at. I was looking at a small tree filled with birds, and a predatory bird, a kind of a goshawk, came flying into the tree and disappeared into that tree. And immediately there's all these alarm calls. Birds are trying to escape out here. This goshawk then is cruising around all over the outside of the tree, disappearing in and out of these bushes. And so it was kind of going around the outside edges of this and then disappearing in. So actively hunting birds that were still here inside this tree. So you see what I've got going on here. I've got, here's a little diagram showing A, B, C. Over here, I'm describing what's going on with that behavior. Here's some more detailed drawings of how the bird itself looks. So not just going like, oh, I saw a goshawk, check, counted one bird. Oh, I have there's a bunch of mouse birds, getting numbers of things, but really trying to get myself to explore this behavior. And if I had not made this diagram, as I sit here today, I would probably hardly remember that I even saw this bird. I might have a life list. I look at it like, oh yeah, I've seen that before. But then you look at your life list and on some of those, you're like, but I can't really remember seeing that. And what was going on there, all those details. Because I put this down on paper, that experience, first of all, is much more vivid in my head. And I also have this document of all of those experiences. This over here, this is another cool bird. This is a tropical bulbul. And the males and females do these little duets. And so I have over here this kind of color-coded thing, and where they will sing, and then the males and females will do these two little sections together. So they both could do, so this part here in the black box, that was sung by both at the same time. And then this one here, one doing kind of a hiss, 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 yurt, hiss, 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 yurt, yurt, right? So this was done by one bird with the blue box. And then the other, the loud, clear part was done by the second bird. So, and then this over here is going, hoot, hoot, hoot. See that over here, the hoot, 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 hoot. So there's a different head position for the who, a different head position for the dote. So its head is going hoodoo, 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 right? And they both are doing that together. So they got the hoodoo, hoodoo, and then all these other sorts of things. So this is a diagram of all that crazy duet behavior. There's no way my brain could retain all these details. But it's with you for a little while when you're out there in the field. So what I want to do is get myself just to look closer and look closer and look closer. What's going on here? What else can I learn? What else can I see? Notice here's a question. I'm wondering about how this if the neck posture changes sort of the vocal apparatus of this so that the head position is actually part of making a different note. I don't know, making a who note. And so here's the head position when it's doing these sorts of calls, both the scratchy and the clear. I mean, that's really cool. That's really weird. But I got to experience this because I stopped, I slowed down, and I was spending more quality time with these birds. And I put those observations on paper. And that's the really critical part, because you think that our brain is going to remember it, but our brain won't. Our brain won't. And you think that your brain is going to be willing to sort of sit there, the process and kind of engage more deeply with this stuff. But it's hard to get your impatient monkey brain to kind of hang on. But if you're journaling about something, it just slows you down. It takes more time, and it allows you to have a vehicle to document, to notice these little things, to record them, and to build on them. The process of putting it on paper is the actual game changer. And so here's a little case study. This is an example with some local birds. These are, well, you guys know these ones, right? There's all these little American coots. So if I was just counting things, I would identify these birds and I would count them. And that would be, so this is at a little local park near my house. Here's a whole bunch of birds. And so you can count those, but just identification and counting is not the end of the story. Did you catch the bonus bird in there? Yep, there is. So these are all American coots out here. And then there's a brant who showed up all by itself in a little park down here in the Bay Area. This little brant didn't get the memo that it should be out with the other brants eating eelgrass somewhere, and it's hanging out with coots, right? It's hanging out with coots and eating the lawn. And so if I were just going for a walk and looking at birds, I'd go like, oh, coot. Oh, look, hey, I haven't seen a brant before. That's really fun. Oh, there's a brant. Great, there's a brant. And then my brain is ready to go on and forget this stuff. If I am using an app to just record my observations, I would say, okay, great, there's 150 coots and a brand, right? But on this day, and again, I think eBird is great. I encourage people to do it, and the data that you put into it becomes part of really useful citizen science. But if we think that that's the end of the experience, we've really shortchanged ourselves. So here are my field notes from the coot party, right? And if you take a look at it, there's a lot that's going on here. So I have seen coots my entire life. I saw coots from some of my earliest birding experiences, but I learned things about coots on this day that I never knew about coots. So check out this. Sorry. Some coots, most of them, they wander around like this. This is their posture for kind of plucking and eating grass. Nom, 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 right? But there's some coots that will lay down in the grass and just eat the grass that's in front of them. And when they pluck grass, they turn their head to the side and pluck it with their head in at a sideways angle. Is that because they then can see where they're targeting better? What is the reason for that? I mean, that's kind of neat. So already looking at coots, two coot observations that I never made before, right? And who knew what coot poo looks like? So here is coot scat drawn in my journal, life size, and it's bright green because it's filled with chlorophyll. And then a red-tailed hawk flies by, and all the coots run towards the water. So that's interesting. From a red-tailed hawk, a threat to the coot, and the water is their safe place. So they all run. They didn't fly to the water. And so I was then wondering about why that is. And this is my thinking, like one possible problem may be that if you start to fly and an aerial predator is coming down, the ones that are starting to fly versus the ones that are running on the ground may be the easiest targets. Or it might be safer for the hawk to kind of go after ones that are in the air. But for some reason, they all ran. So isn't that interesting? See, what that is, it's a little mystery. I noticed something. Ooh, the coots run. And then I take it to the next level. Why do they run and not fly? Right? There's can be several different possibilities. So notice that I'm also not saying like, this is why. As a good scientist, I'm being kind of really tentative in here. You know, could it be that this is a possible explanation? But notice how all of this is just getting me to engage more deeply with the behavior of the coots and pay more attention to this experience. This is kind of fun. I love the kind of dangly feet as the coots fly around. And also, there's a little kid who came out and started chasing my flock of coots around as I was drawing them. And just like a flock of birds in a murmuration in the sky, they all kind of schooled like fish and were just swirling around this kid, kind of keeping in their formation, but also not flying. That was interesting. So when it was a terrestrial predator, the little child running after all the coots, they also ran on the ground. And when it was an aerial predator coming in, they also ran on the ground. So that's really cool. And here's my brant. I could have, if I just went, wow, it's a brant, that's really cool. I wouldn't have, putting these brant notes in my journal slowed me down. I'm looking at like, where's the white on the sides? What are these patterns? What's going on with this? How does it look from the front? How does it look from the back? So initially I'm just making observations, but that gives me time enough to notice that like a big bully on a schoolyard, the brant would just walk right towards and steamroll right over coots. Here's a little coot. And the brant's just walking around and doing this chest push on them and pushing them out of the way. It wasn't pecking at them, but pushing them out of the way with its chest. And then later on, I found the brant. It left the coots and went over and tried hanging out with Canada goose. And there it would like kind of sneak up behind them and pull on their tails. So here it's bigger, here it's smaller, but still kind of reminded me of like a little bully with a Napoleon complex, right? And I mean, isn't that fun? But this comes from just being still and hanging out with these critters, right? And so how can you get yourself to slow down and spend more quality time? And all these stories start to emerge. But that doesn't happen when we kind of go kind of light and fast. The fact that the journal slows me down is really the game changer for me. That's what's so exciting. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to show you a few bird drawing tricks. And I'm using some photographs from my friend Vivek Kenzodi. These are all available on his website, which is seeing birds, birdpixel.com. So birdpixel. And want to encourage people to, you can go there, and he encourages us birders and naturalists to feel free to practice off all those wonderful photographs in his collection. And this is, so a bird pops up in front of you and you want to get this bird down onto paper. What I do is when the bird appears to me, I know that if I just stare at the bird, I then look down at my paper, it's hard for me to keep the details in mind long enough to transfer them to paper. So here's the trick. This is called the production effect. It's a really powerful observation trick that will also help your journaling and sketching. Even if you aren't a sketcher, even if you don't sketch, you can do this same trick. And what I do is, as I look at the bird, I'm going to say out loud all the details that I see about it. And I just kind of walk, kind of cruise all around the bird. And you're going to hear me saying out loud what I see. And then what I'm going to do is I am going to turn my attention over to my paper and try to transfer all this information down to the piece of paper. But if I just stare at the bird, it's hard for me to remember that. So here's the way it works. What you do is you say out loud all the things that you see. So let me just demonstrate. So I'm going to start talking out loud to this bird. All right, sort of typical sparrow size. It has gray head, sharp line on the back of the nape where it kind of comes into the back, which is red-brown. Red-brown going over the tertials and greater coverts. Gray on the lesser coverts and the edge, the bottom edge of those median coverts. The greater coverts. White trim on the primary feathers and the other secondary feathers. The rest of them are dark brown. Gray belly, brownish throat, sort of brown, no, not gray belly, gray up by the sides of the flanks by the wing, but kind of sort of a warm brown underneath the throat, the malar, and going down onto the belly. Pink legs, gray on the toes. I'm seeing white outer tail feathers on a black tail, but towards the tip of the tail, I don't see as much white. The beak is black on the top, yellow on the bottom, bright yellow eye, black lores. So you notice I'm using a number of technical terms for parts of the birds. This is something that is really useful to learn, because if you use this language, it kind of gives you a bird map. I recommend everybody use David Sibley's system. If you are going to learn this, get yourself one of those Sibley guides, and he's got little diagrams in the front that you can use. So check that out. And so I've just talked my way through a bunch of this bird. I can also do kind of posture and proportion talk to it. So from straight down the head, down the back, it's a straight line at about 2 o'clock. So if you imagine a clock, that is, going from the 2 on the hand to the center, about that angle is roughly the angle of the back of this bird. The front of the chest coming down straight, big steep cut into the paler white undertail coverts. So when the bird is in front of you, I talk to the bird. And you're going to find that even if you don't have a journal with you, this is going to get a lot of those details into more short-term memory. And that is going to help me then be able to transfer it to the page. When you say things out loud, your brain will be able to hold much more information in it. All right. So I am now going to stop sharing. And hi, me. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump over to a document camera. And I'm going to show you how I would take, I'm now, we're going to just have to kind of be on the honor system here. I am no longer looking at that photograph of the bird. I cannot see it. It's not on another screen on my computer. And I'm going to see how much is left in my head from memory. And what you're going to see is that because I have kind of I've been studying birds for a little while, so I know their basic bird plan. But because, and that's going to help me draw it. The other thing that's going to help me draw it is because I said everything out loud, then I am, see, I've just changed speakers. Chris, give me a thumbs up if you can still hear me clearly. Thumbs up, great. All right, so here's what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw on this piece of paper that bird that I was just looking at, and you're going to see that I'm going to kind of go through in my head all those things that I said out loud. My memory of it is going to be good because I verbalized it. All right, so I'm going to start just with that angle of the back at about 2 o'clock. And what I do is I put this down lightly and loosely on my paper. I'm going to be doing, I tend to do a lot of my sort of field sketching with a ballpoint pen, but I'll often block it in lightly with a light blue pencil. The pencil that I usually use to do that is a erasable Col-Erase non-photo blue pencil, but this doesn't really show up on my video. So I'm using a little mechanical pencil that's got some blue lead in it that you can actually see on the screen. But you notice it's a fairly light line. All right, and then here is the back of that bird, I mean the head of that bird, and it has a ball of a body, and it had some undertail coverts. A wing went up on the side here, and there's sort of a ball of sort of more flight feathers in there. And little wing, maybe it was kind of a slightly more drooping down at an angle. Had a sharp pointed beak coming out this way, maybe not that big. And so I'll lightly kind of block in my bird. Places that I pay a lot of attention to are, is there an angle change at the back of the head here? Or is it just a flat back? So some birds, you'll see them kind of with an angle like that on the back if they hold their heads up. Same bird can do both positions. Another thing really useful to look at is where the head attaches to the body. What is that angle right in there? Then this one, yeah, the body kind of came down more like that. There's a little undertail coverts. This is another fun place where there's interesting angles. Right there underneath those where the breast feathers kind of end and the undertail coverts come in. All right, so there are a few little details. Now I can, so that's my basic bird sketch. As I'm doing this, if the bird moves, by the way, and like it moves towards me, I would then just start another sketch of this bird kind of from the front. Right, and or if it,
whatever I see about it, I'm just going to, I can often get several drawings all going at the same time on my page. That's what I was doing with those coots. But once I've got a basic shape in that I like.
Hey, Jack, this is Chris. Do you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
There's a request for a little more focus on the drawing.
More focus on the drawing. Let me see if I can. Is that better?
That's about the same, but that looks like as good as we can get. Thank you.
Okay, I'm afraid that's the best we can do. So let me. Sometimes when I've got sort of multiple light pencil lines, they come across as looking like the thing is out of focus, but really I just have many lines there. So here is my top of the head of the bird, and there's that beautiful bright yellow eye. The black pupil. And we had those, what are called the lores. The lores are the area between the eye and the beak, and they were black in this bird. Often putting in this bird had a little bit of an ear patch. That was gray. The upper beak was gray, as well as the head. Some reason I like drawing with a ballpoint pen is just like a pencil, I can use this lightly and I get a light line. So I can get sort of variation in that line. Whoop. I think I want to round his head up a little bit. Now, then we went down onto a back. And that back was that red-brown. How can I show that this is red-brown? I could get out some watercolors or some colored pencils, or I could just draw a little line in here that say this is gray. You'll find that the minute you start writing on your drawing like this, that a lot of the pressure to make a pretty picture goes off. Now, if you're interested in making pretty pictures, that's okay, but don't worry about it during nature journaling. Your big goal when you're journaling is to observe and then to observe and then to observe a little bit more and then observe. So with this guy, if I have little lines, this is red-brown, it feels much more like notes and less like an art project. And this is Buffy Gray. All right, it feels a lot more like notes. And I am, for me, that's really, it's kind of like a pressure relief valve. This doesn't have to be a perfect picture. I find if I'm worried about having to make a really perfect picture, it locks me up and makes it difficult for me to be able to take notes in fiction. I get so wound up about what the thing on the paper that it gets in the way of me experiencing the bird in front of me. But if I just sort of think of it as like, this is just as a memory cue for me, then that's much more useful. So I'm going to get into this bird's wing. All right, so the bird, so when we think about birds' wings, when we all meet at the Winter Bird Festival, we'll have a let's geek out in a hardcore way about bird anatomy for artists, and we'll get a class for you folks all about that, doing a super deep dive in it. This is just kind of a quicker version, is that in a bird wing that's folded up, very often you can kind of break it into three parts there is an upper part called the wing coverts. And this bird it was mostly gray, but there was sort of a red-brown patch. So maybe I'll just use these sort of wide spaced cross-hatching lines for my red-brown. So there's red-brown that comes in here, the rest was gray. There is a section of feathers in here called the secondaries that sort of make a big block here sticking up on the back of the bird. And then there's what are called primary feathers that stick down underneath that. So if you're looking at David Sibley's book, you can sort of see those sections, those feathers in his diagrams. I really recommend people kind of learn those. They'll help your birding, they'll help your sketching. And these ones on the top here were red-brown. And then the ones down in here, everything had these white edges on it. And they're more gray. So I'm able to hold that information in my head because I said things out loud. While you were watching, you probably at home were not saying those things out loud. So your memory of those may not be as good. So if you're wondering, like, how could you remember all that sort of stuff? Remember, it was gray in here. I remember that stuff because I verbalized it. And then this part here is more of that kind of buffy gray ground coming in there. Undertail coverts were white. And then that tail that was sticking out, it had on the outside edge, you could see that there was a white edge on the junco tail. This actually it's a yellow-eyed junco. But it was harder to see that towards the tip of the tail. And then there's a little pink leg coming down. Aw. Bird legs, they come out at a forward angle. I forget exactly the position of this foot here, but kind of have some suggestion of some toes wrapping around a branch here. I think this bird's branch might have been going in the opposite direction, but that's okay. Sorry, branch. All right, so I mean, there's a bunch of notes about that bird. It really helps to start to write all over it. If it flicked its tail, if it was like, doing something like, gnat catcher tail flicking, then you can often, draw multiple tails on a single bird. Just because I think those colors are so much fun, I'm going to just drop a little bit of color in on this because I can. Now I've got all those color notes reminding me what color it is where. Verbalizing while the bird is in front of you, and then quickly as you can, transferring that down to some notes on paper is very, so this part was more kind of buffy. And where do we have, we had gray that was coming in here. We had some gray in there. And whoa, too much water. That's where all those little white edges were. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll just test colors off on the side to see. Yeah, that's better. No, I think I want that a little bit brighter. There we go. Drawing is a skill that develops with practice. It is not a gift that some people have and some people don't. What we're finding is it takes about a year of just drawing on a regular basis to have it really start to sink in a very solid way that's, even giving you, positive feedback, where you enjoy doing it, and the bird that you get really starts to look like that thing. So you think like, I'd like to draw, but I haven't drawn in a long time. I want to invite you onto a year of drawing dangerously. And just to start adding drawings into your field notes, you do that by the time we convene at the next Winter Bird Festival. This is really going to be a solid skill set for you, and you'll be able to kind of take it to the next level.
Hey, John, this is Chris again. A couple questions as you're drawing. Are you using a watercolor pencil, or is that a watercolor set?
This is a brush that is what's called a water brush. It has the water inside its handle. And I just have a watercolor palette that I'm dipping into.
Perfect.
And that is for doing stuff in the field, a much, much easier way to do watercolor than to try to do it with a conventional brush.
And you said you want me to start drawing for a whole year. Is that like every day, every other day? How often am I going to drawing?
Well, if you can do it every day, then what's happened is you've totally caught the bug, and you're in the zone, and it's just gonna, that's great. If that happens to you, you're lucky. For me, I have a hard time getting myself to draw that frequently. If you can get yourself 2 to 3 times a week to just do a little sketch, so you could just doesn't need to be something that takes a lot of time, but just regularly kind of getting out, and if you just start sketching each time you go out birding, you're going to find that it gets better and gets better and gets better.
Great. Quick interruption. Hey, everybody, if you're raising your hand, we're not recognizing raised hands, but if you want to ask a question, throw that in the chat under chat with Chris, and we'll ask him questions at the end. These were just a couple of immediate questions that had to do with what he was doing right now, but the other questions will happen at the end of the program. Okay, I'm going mute again.
Thank you for doing this. If there are other questions that are relevant, we can kind of hit on the fly here. Let's absolutely bring those in.
Okay, well, since you asked, somebody wants to know, how do you clean your brush between dips?
Wasn't that fun? Like sometimes it comes back and the brush is all clean. Let me show you the secret trick. Oh, let me back up here. Whoop. And look at this. I have an old sock. I have an old sock on my wrist. So what I do is I squeeze the water brush and I wipe it on this, and then my brush is clean.
Everybody get a screenshot of that.
Yeah. Oh, are we recording this?
We are recording this, yes.
Great. So, and the folks will have access to that recording later on.
Absolutely. What do you do when you're in Oregon and it's wet out and your sock is wet and you're in wet conditions?
So first of all, you don't have to use watercolor. Colored pencil is a fantastic medium for nature journaling and bird journaling. If it is rainy and wet, I've tried painting in the rain, and with all sorts of methods. I've tried using a a clear plastic bag over the thing, but then my wet sleeves are getting in under the bag, and then it's rough. So what I find that what I will often do when it's really raining is either going out, verbalizing what I see, and then when I can get to a sheltered place, pulling out my materials and journaling with those. If in superhuman conditions where nothing wants to dry, then the colored pencils are also a really useful way to go. And but in a direct downpour, I find it's really difficult. Also, like those Write in the Rain books. I thought, like, I'll just have that book open and write in the rain. But then you're thinking, like, if that's really happening, your fingers are getting cold, you're getting cold, you now have got hypothermia in your fingers, and you're just like, is not fun for you. So I also find it challenging to paint in that direct downpour. So that person in Oregon, I feel your pain.
Move somewhere else.
Yeah, I'll often kind of move to a different point. You saw, this is kind of a fun trick. I added some white pen lines in here. This is a white gel pen. And it's the Signo Uniball white gel pen, and I can draw in some of those little lines that were in the white part of the wing. So you see on this, lots of that information about that bird stuck with me. There also are going to be parts of this drawing that are wrong. This page, I know, will have mistakes on it. And that's okay. That is absolutely okay. I used to think that all my field notes needed to be, everything needed to be, exact and perfect, like a field guide. Now, it turns out that when people are making field guides, what they're doing is they're taking all of their field notes like this, and they are combining those with photographs and study skins, and they're sitting in their comfortable studio. It's not raining, and they can put all those bits of information together, and that makes for much easier drawing. But your field notes, there's going to be mistakes in them, and that's okay. These are just your impressions of what you were seeing. And what's neat about this is because you committed those thoughts to paper, the next time you go out and you see that bird, if there's something that you put in the wrong place, it will really stand out to you, because you've kind of put your chip down saying, I think that this is this way. And then the next time you look at it, you'll go like, oh, wow, that gray actually really came into this place, or that the pale brown really kind of came up behind there in a V. And, or that's the wrong value of gray. It's actually a lighter gray. Oh, interesting. Whatever it is, that will really pop out to you because you put this stuff down on paper. And then when you make another sketch of it, the next one will be incrementally that much closer to the way that the bird really is. And that, if you're not making sketches, then you get none of that feedback. You have a subjective sense that you think you know what the bird looks like, but you don't have anything that step by step by step by step is getting closer. As long as you can kind of look at a bird and you kind of like, oh yeah, I know what a Lasley bunting looks like. Yes, it's a Lasley bunting. Great. Then that's where your brain stops really paying attention and isn't refining the nuances, but how is the real bird different than my kind of subjective impression in my head of the way I think it's supposed to look. The bird in my head is actually different than the bird in the field. but it's only through journaling like this and putting my chip down that I'm able to then look at what is in my brain and look back at the bird and start to step by step increase the accuracy of my mental picture of that organism.
Hey, Jack, let me ask a question. And this question has been repeated, I don't know, 10 times, and you probably heard it 1,000 times. When you're trying to be in the field and observe these birds are moving around. How in the world do you get that long of a look when you're working with a moving target? And do you use photos or do you use guidebooks? And what do you do with this moving target?
An excellent question. So if my voice is a little bit more faint because I'm now on the other side of the room grabbing some journals off the shelf, which I'm going to be pulling over for you. Because here we go. This will do.
And while you're grabbing journals, let me just announce to everybody, there are a lot of questions about what gel pen, what colored pencils, what paints, and those are all in a link on the chat. Jack's website has lists of those supplies, and we're not going to ask those questions because those questions are already answered at johnmuirlaws.com field-sketching-equipment / so you can get all the information online, so we won't be asking those questions.
All right. So yeah, this one, I looked at a still photograph and it was cooperative for a long time. We all know real birds don't do that. Real birds are much more cooperative though than mammals. Mammals have to hide from us, so they regularly do. But the birds will sit out there in front of you and kind of do their bird thing because they can fly away. So it's specifically because they can fly away that they actually let themselves hang around. So it's a little bit counterintuitive because everybody says, yeah, birds fly away. But what we find is I start looking at birds, you know, you can either follow one bird over time. Another thing you can do is as you get sort of successive looks at something, you can refine what you do. I'm going to open up some real journal pages. So these are all done from life in the field, no photographs. Right? And what you see is that the bird is sitting there. And so this was a kingfisher that was sitting up on a perch and would fly down into the water and then come back up. And then it would fly back down into the water, come back up. And so every time it would pop up, it'd be in a different pose. So I start with position number 1, and then the bird moves. What I do is on the same page, start a new drawing of that bird from a new position. And as I'm trying to draw the head from the side, it will look away from me. So I could just tap my fingers and wait for it to turn its head to the side. Or I could start drawing a view of the back of the head. And then it turns its head around and looks straight towards me. So I start that, I just get that started when it goes back to this position. So I jump back to here, continue drawing this face. And then it goes back to that. Okay, I go back to that. Then it flies back down, comes back up in this position, and I get to continue that drawing. So you'll see that very often there are multiple drawings of the same bird because it is, as it's moving around. Look, this one was looking away from me. So what did I do? I drew it looking away from me. This one looked towards me. I got to draw it looking towards me.
Jack,
so,
when you draw that malachite kingfisher 3 days later, probably a different bird, maybe a different little place, do you go back to that? Well, but you can't go back to that same page because it's already full. Do you just start a new page of a malachite kingfisher?
Yep. Yep. So there's probably, if I go through here, there'll be, let me see. We'll see where I kind of encounter. So here is African paradise flycatcher number 1, right?
Yeah.
So I'm looking at this bird, and then I will see when I see that again. Here it is, bird number 2.
Mm-hmm.
Right? My brain already has information from before, and now I'm building on that. And let me see. my next paradise flycatcher. Right. So later on, I get an even better look at the bird. But this bird is now informed by this bird and this first bird experience. So, like, my first time seeing this, I'm not able to kind of dial in on it as much. Now I'm getting a little bit more refined, and now I'm really getting a sense for this bird because of these sort of repeated encounters. So incrementally, my understanding of what I see is ratcheting closer and closer towards it. Here's the malachite kingfisher again. And, this time I'm learning new things about it. Like, let's go back to that first malachite kingfisher. Like here, I'm getting more of these this little tuft on the back on this little bird is really poofing up. It's really poofing up and sticking out. So from the front, I get this weird effect. And also this one, I was down below looking up. So it's a slightly different angle than this one was looking straight towards me. Each time I play with it, my brain is noticing different sorts of things. And you notice I also have writing all over the page, right? Large fish, can't swallow it. All right, leans to the side, then whaps fish into the brown. Yep, I ate it all. Here it is. This is a full malachite kingfisher. This is kind of fun. While I was here sketching, kids in the community came by and were watching me do this. And then one of them ran down to the lake, caught a fish, brought the fish back so I could sketch the fish and then put into the drawing the kind of fish that they were finding in the lake. And they're really beautiful little fish. That was a cool day. Here's another malachite kingfisher. So as I work, I'm getting multiple views of the same thing. And birds are so much more cooperative than mammals. It's because they can fly away that very often they don't have to. Mammals are much more elusive. So let's try a little bit of this ourselves. What I'm going to do is I am going to put up a bird on the screen. Let me see here. Go back to share. Let's first jump back and we'll see that bird again. And now I can look at it because now notice that I kind of put my nickel down on what I thought I was seeing. And now let's take a look at this and see what is different about it. All right, so lower bill is more yellowish than I drew mine. Okay, that's cool. The pupil is larger than I drew mine. That's also cool. These feathers down here, these top ones, these tertials, have dark tips on them. All right, I didn't get that in my drawing. But you see how I can now just kind of go around and refine things because, I didn't get the gray on the tops of the toes. I'd forgotten that detail, even though I mentioned it, right? But now notice how I can kind of go around and now when I look at it, these aspects of this bird that are different than what I put down on my paper really stand out to me. And that's a lot of the power of doing this, is you're helping your brain. It's what's neuropsychologists call metacognition. I'm able to think about what I'm thinking. I'm able to really visualize my visualization of this bird because I drew it. And that is That's really helpful. So let's play with this one. What I want you to do is let's just first sit here for a moment. You're muted, so don't worry, you're not going to disturb everybody. But I'm going to ask you just to start saying out loud, kind of we're going to walk through on this bird, say as much as you can about it, both about any angles of the shape that will help you remember that shape, and then the colors, patterns, anything you can see about it. So I'm going to ask you at home just to start doing that right now. If you choose not to, because it feels weird to kind of start saying this stuff out loud, doesn't it? So if that feels a little bit funny to you, don't feel bad about that. It is weird at the start because we're trained that crazy people talk to themselves, but I'm going to ask you on a regular basis to talk to yourself when you're out with the birds. If you do that, you will see birds better. And so it's just a habit that you have to start trying to get your brain into. I'm going to give you a moment to try to do this on your own. And then I will also talk through some of the things. I'm going to just mute myself for a minute so I can start talking to my bird. Let's give it a try now.